Richard until the end. And besides, he had information about Henry. Edward learned that Henry had a sacred sword, but he was not yet aware of the unusual properties of this relic. Then, with a wicked smile, Edward said that this could be used against Henry, and he had just the plan. Taking up the sword, Richard did not understand what his young ally was hinting at, or what plan he was proposing for the battle. In response, Edward pulled out a vial of blood from a high ancient family, which, after drinking, Richard would gain incredible power. After this, Richard may even gain immortality, as his body will change forever, becoming less vulnerable. Edward wondered what Richard would say and whether he would take risks to avenge Charlie's death. At this time, Henry was in the room, and after meditation, he realized that his speed of development was increasing every day. Jumping to his feet, he happily realized that he had already reached the peak of the 9th level, and would soon be able to begin soul purification. It's time to end the long-standing conflict with Richard's family and remove the obstacle that is preventing him from preparing for the mutant invasion. Having met Jimmy on the street, he admitted that he would go and sort things out alone, and the guy did not believe that his friend had decided to do this alone. His friends unanimously assured him that there was a crowd of cultivators there now, and he alone would definitely not be able to cope with such a crowd. But the guy had already decided everything and did not want to involve others, so he asked everyone not to worry about him and just wait until everything was over. The guys knew that once this guy had decided on something, he could not be persuaded otherwise, and they only loudly wished him good luck in the upcoming battle. At the same time, Julia begged her aunt to let her go to Henry so that she could help the boy in this unequal battle. But Michelle didn't remember Julia asking for something like this before, because the girl had long been a rival of the student. She knew Richard's true strength, so she had no doubt that this fight would be the most difficult in Henry's life. But what could an ordinary student do? Just the head of a committee whose strength was far less than the strength of any fighter in Richard's family. Putting her hands on her shoulders, Michelle said that the girl needed to know something first. A few days ago, the Emperor summoned her to discuss the sacred sword, and in that conversation, she learned some very important information. And then Julia learned with horror that the sacred blade, which had disappeared many years ago, with all its power, could be in Richard's possession. And there was a high probability that in this battle he would use his sword, and anyone who came across him would die. Of course, it was hard to accept, but by going there, Julia risked her life and had little chance of returning from this deadly fight. Only this sword could break the magic circle that protected people from monsters, and it could also kill the witch at the head of the invasion. And the outcome of the battle depended on whose hands the blade would end up, and all that remained was to hope that it would somehow end up in Henry's hands. After these words, Julia could not object, although thoughts of going against her aunt were swarming in her head. Then Michelle suddenly said that the guy was unlikely to come alone, and his friends would probably be ready to die for him. She was not mistaken, because soon the guy saw right in front of him those who decided to take this step. Having lost to this student, Logan and his clan wanted to repay the guy for sparing his life. The entire Fight Club was willing to take the risk, although it took a long meeting for the guys to make this difficult decision. Smiling, the guy said that he wouldn't dare ask, but since they decided so, he wouldn't mind taking them on the team. Suddenly he saw Ralph and Aurora nearby, who had also come to the square for some reason that morning, probably on Frank's orders. It was hard to tell if they were serious about fighting Richard's clan, but Ralph's look made it clear that he would fight to the end. But along the way, Ralph clarified that he was not there on Frank's behalf, but came of his own free will to help his friend. It seemed that the number of Henry's allies was growing, because another fighter, who had also lost to this alchemist, had joined them. Like Logan, Bruce and his entire team also showed up to the meeting, intending to fight not against Henry, but shoulder to shoulder with him against Richard. And soon, instead of going into battle alone, he led a huge team of elite fighters, each of whom could defeat several monsters. Although at first the guy warned that the fight would be fatal, and asked everyone to stay at home. But even Sophia and Jimmy did not listen to the guy, and also showed up for the battle, wanting to somehow help him win. Then it became clear that an entire army of magicians was ready to enter the battle, filling the entire road, and its participants were visible even on the horizon. Silently, the guy clenched his fists even tighter, and walked towards the one who would feel the full force of his new team today. There was no doubt in his eyes, and soon he saw his rivals ahead. As expected, among them were the strongest magicians of the Empire, although they were clearly inferior in numbers to Henry's team. The old man who led that group of fighters loudly called on everyone to calm down, and not to panic in the face of the huge crowd of enemies. He knew that even he was a little scared, but only he could unite his people and prevent them from escaping. From the outside, it seemed that Henry's team was many times superior in numbers to their opponents, but he knew that numbers were not the main thing in this fight. He was ready to rush into the attack first, in order to take on as many fighters in the main blow of the crowd as possible. But to his surprise, all the guys behind him rushed forward, wanting this fight even more than he did. From that side, the fighters of the Richard family immediately rushed at them because they were also well prepared, and an experienced old man led a crowd of young cultivators. However, none of them knew what kind of warrior they would have to fight today, but since they were here, it was too late to retreat. And in a moment the teams clashed, immediately unleashing all the most powerful magic that the fighters possessed. It was clear that the battle would not be without casualties, and with his first shot of fireballs, Logan killed 2 enemies in front. Turning around, Ralph saw the ambush boy preparing to strike him from behind with destructive energy. Luckily, Bruce arrived at that moment, saw the attack from afar, and managed to knock the attacker aside. Now they stood back to back, and the former enemies united for one common victory. In fact, this was Bruce's first truly serious fight, because even the brutal annual fight in the arena seemed like child's play compared to this mortal battle. Everyone on Henry's team was an excellent magician, and the guys learned a lot from the young leader, quickly raising their level. At some point, he realized that Sophia was even stronger than he thought, and she dealt with enemies as if she had been waiting for a real fight for a long time. She had long dreamed of testing her new ability, and today was an excellent chance to do so. Suddenly, the chief magician of Richard's family appeared next to them, bringing with him a small surprise. It turned out that this magician defeated the strongest fighter from Logan's squad, and declared that the enemies would win only over his corpse. The fighter the mage held was not only Logan's talented warrior, but also his loyal friend, who had walked hand in hand with him for many years. In the last moments of his life, the boy said that he did everything he could, but the old man turned out to be much stronger than he expected. Even Henry's magic watch showed that this damn old man's skills were above level 90, and he realized with horror that he was only so fragile in appearance. Aurora confirmed that the old man had dealt with 3 strong level 90 cultivators at once by himself, and it was hard to imagine his full power. Realizing that he had to avenge his friend, Logan unleashed all the mana available to him and charged. He wanted to deal with the nasty old man himself, using the same force he had recently used against Henry. But without even giving him time to come to his senses, Henry was the first to rush at the old man, not wanting to expose his new friend to the blow of a strong enemy. It seemed that the old man was the only one who looked at Henry running towards him with a defiant expression, knowing the true power of this alchemist. Coming closer, Henry said with a smile that the old man's level would not help him, because the guy had prepared a new surprise for him. Meanwhile, the rest of the agents of Richard's family saw with their own eyes the main ability that Logan mastered to perfection. He used his ability again, tearing so many trees out of the ground that the flat road turned into a dense forest around them. Realizing that the enemies were running, the guy shouted that they couldn't let the bastards get away and that they had to finish off everyone who raised a hand against them. Looking back, Henry at some point realized that all of his recent rivals had run away and they were left here completely alone. This was strange, since they were unlikely to disobey Richard, and, most likely, this was the original plan. It seemed like a trap, and Aurora warned that they had to stand still and not move until everything became clear. There was not a soul in the area, and all that was left was to wait for the next move from the scoundrel Richard. It was simply dangerous to go forward, and the boys understood that due to the strength of their opponents, it could end badly for them. It's a pity that no one had mastered the purification of the soul, because with it one could go deep without worrying about anything. In response, Henry stated that although there was no such magician among them, there was one immortal ruler among his allies. He then summoned a new spirit, Sky Fox, to reunite with her powers and put her abilities to use. The Sky Fox immediately responded to the call, and after a few moments their mana was reunited into one. Using the fox's inner vision, which she had possessed in life, the boy could now scan the area and see all the details. It was hard to imagine how the guy had received the support of such an influential spirit, but it was clear that he was not an easy person. And he replied with a smile that the Heavenly Fox herself agreed to help, knowing that he did everything for the sake of saving humanity. Now he should take a deep breath and focus on the surroundings to awaken spiritual energy and begin the cleansing. But as soon as the guy began the ritual, suddenly someone else attacked from afar, holding a sharp blade in his hands. Sophia was the first to notice the ambush and shouted loudly to her boyfriend to use protective magic. Hearing her words, Henry immediately pulled his blade out of its sheath and cut the blade of his opponent's dagger with one swing. From the outside it looked strange, because the guy didn't open his eyes, and only with his inner vision determined where the attacker was. However, he not only destroyed the enemy's weapon, but also hit the fighter right in the throat with his blade. After this, the fighter flew far to the side and it became clear that even the most powerful magician would not survive such a blow. Realizing that time was running out, Henry decided to personally go to Richard, who was probably waiting for him in this mansion. It was difficult to understand the plans of Richard's accomplices, but there was simply no time to wait for their next move. However, already on the approach to the building, he saw enemies right in front of him, activating the power of two elements. Still without opening his eyes, the boy quietly ordered the Skyfox to be ready and give him a portion of her mana to repel the attack. Swinging his sacred blade, he struck straight at the two clots of energy that were almost close to him. After the strike, everyone saw in the distance the bloody bodies of two fighters, from which blood gushed in different directions. But this was only the beginning of Richard's plan, because the next fighter was already preparing to strike from behind. Aurora shouted at the guy not to lose his vigilance, although with his new skill he had long since understood where to expect an attack from. When the enemy's blade was already descending on Henry's head and almost pierced him, he still stood in place without even moving. But at the last second he only dodged and his opponent pierced only the illusory image that stood in Henry's place. The boy realized with horror that the rumors about the alchemist's genius were not fiction at all, and that Henry could do much more than any other warrior. However, it was too late to think, because Henry had prepared his counterattack to finish off the enemy. After a monstrous direct blow with a blade, the fighter fell to the ground and froze forever in this pose, showing no signs of life. His whole body was covered in blood. Blood was oozing from his wounds, and from their depth it was clear that it was impossible to survive. And the guy calmly walked on, realizing that Richard's surprises were not over, even though the mercenaries had been destroyed. It is difficult to say whether a person is capable of what Aurora saw, but she knew for sure that she would never forget this sight. On the way, he told the Heavenly Fox that when he used spiritual energy, it felt like the speed of everyone around him slowed down tenfold. But she warned that it was unlikely to work against Richard, who might also have a similar ability. His estate was so close that one could simply walk in and meet the owner. But everything around seemed suspiciously quiet. Although the guy behind Henry suggested surrounding the building and storming in as a crowd, Skyfox understood the naivety of that decision. In addition, the entrance was guarded by two artifacts on either side of the door, and at some point Henry realized that he had been ambushed. For right around them, a magic circle had appeared, similar to the seal that Richard had used to declare blood feud. Not wanting to be a victim of the dark magician, Aurora suddenly activated a hidden power, ready to take the situation into her own hands. In her hands was an artifact that allowed her to absorb someone else's energy and use it in battle for some time. Raising the artifact above her head, the girl declared that she was ready to do everything alone if they transferred their mana to her. It was difficult to understand the intentions of this brave warrior, but soon everyone saw an energy vortex in the square in front of the estate. Luckily, the girl had a magic shield, without which the group could have had serious problems. However, her spell was too strong, and at this rate the shield would not last long. It seemed the time had come for Henry's trump card, although the immortal spirit was against it. Turning to the immortal spirit, the boy did not understand why he was afraid to use the powers of the Heavenly Fox, because he had already won with it. The thing is, the power of his spirits was limited, and the next use could be the guy's last. At this time, Sophia prepared to use the rest of her magic, realizing that this attack was planned by Richard. But Aurora shouted loudly that they could handle it, and that they needed to finish this quickly, so that they could only move forward. There was no time to hesitate, and she continued to spend mana, holding a clot of light energy above her head. However, everyone forgot that Henry was the most famous alchemist in the city, and his skills could also be useful here. He then threw everyone small bottles of a potion that could restore mana, which could be drunk at any time. Henry himself, for example, already preferred to drink one pill, without waiting until his mana was completely depleted. This sight even made Aurora's eye twitch, because she knew that one such jar cost no less than 50 million. But the time for jokes was over, and Henry intended to personally see the man who had probably made a contract with the Dark Force. Taking a step into the unknown, he realized that only he had the strength to fight Richard, and expected several surprises from this magician. Right in front of him, he noticed an empty space that could create illusions and transport him to other worlds. The Sky Fox immediately reminded that it was harder to fight here, because the illusions would show Henry the most terrible memories of his life. And indeed, all this time, Richard, as if from behind the scenes, controlled the magic that filled every corner of this room.